And our politics lead today on Capitol Hill, Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was peppered with questions behind closed doors from conservative Republican senators such as Mike Lee and Josh Hawley. Lee told reporters that he will continue a, quote, thorough review ahead of her confirmation hearing at the end of the month. Hawley called their meeting substantive, while moderate Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine struck a more positive tone, calling her huddle yesterday with Judge Jackson, quote, productive, and saying that the judge's credentials were, quote, impressive. But Collins emphasized that she has not yet made a decision. She is one of 3 Republicans to have voted to confirm Jackson to her current role on the D.C. Federal Appeals Court. Our panel joins us now. So, Tia, everyone wants to know how moderate Republicans like Susan Collins will vote on Jackson's nomination, especially fellow Democratic senators like Mark Warner, who reposted this photo of him questioning Collins, posing as a Capitol Hill reporter. But do you expect any early yes commitments from any Republicans ahead of the hearing?
I don't expect them to play their hands that early. Perhaps after the hearings next week that you'll have some that start coming around. But I think, they don't want to commit themselves because there will be 4 days of more public vetting of Judge Jackson. And I think none of them want to get out there and then something perhaps come out or happen during the hearing. So I would expect after next week, you'll start seeing people saying where they land on her nomination. And
Casey, the top Republican on the Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, he thinks the timeline for this nomination process is rushed and, quote, arbitrary. Dick Durbin's office, the Democratic whip, he points out Republicans only waited 16 days after announcing Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to start confirmation hearings. This will be 24 days. Despite the hypocrisy, do you think they're going to use this rush timeline argument, the Republicans?
I've been around this town long enough, Jake, as have you, to know that those charges of hypocrisy don't seem to matter to either side in any circumstance like this. It's pretty shameless, especially, I mean, frankly, Republicans in particular. Alice, I apologize, but, when you look at what Mitch McConnell the way he will twist the arguments on their head sometimes. I mean, there are people in this town that admire that, but it is really something to see. And he rushed Amy Coney Barrett through. If this timeline is arbitrary, I don't see how that one wasn't.
Look, this is a big deal. This is a lifetime appointment. This is one of the most important factors for a lot of people's vote, mine specifically when it came to my vote in the last 2 elections, because it is a lifetime appointment. It's important and it's imperative that we slow down, let the senators engage in their advise and consent process for this nomination. And look, yes, there is a bit of hypocrisy, but if you look at the actual numbers, the average timeline for a confirmation is around 53 days. Amy Coney Barrett in total was 30 days, and the Democrat schedule in this case for Judge Jackson is around 24. So this is a much shorter timeline. It is arbitrary, but the most important thing here is to have a thorough and accurate vetting process because this is such an important decision.
Do you think they're going to get any Republican votes?
I don't know. I've kind of given up on predicting what Republicans will do, but I think that this is, I mean, we're talking about a few days between what you just said, so it's not really that
24 and 30.
There's
right?
not that big of a difference, and I agree it is a very important position in this country. Judge Jackson, though, of course, was just before the committee
last summer.
Yeah, a year ago. So where Amy Coney Barrett had been about 3 years. And so this isn't like a new person that they're not familiar with. So I think that, she's eminently qualified, and unless something comes up that we don't know about, there's really no reason that she shouldn't be confirmed. There's really no reason to wait. I don't really know what would happen if you added a few more days to it.
So it is the midterms. Let's turn to an election in North Carolina. Former President Trump's endorsed candidate for North Carolina's Senate seat, the retiring Senator Mr. Burr, is leaving the seat open. And Trump's pick, Ted Budd, is slipping behind his opponents in internal polling and in fundraising, according to Politico. One of Budd's opponents, Republican former North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory, released this attack ad today. Take a look.
While Ukrainians bled and died,
he's a very intelligent actor.
Congressman Budd excused their killer.
There are strategic reasons why he would want to protect his southern and western flank. We understand that.
Budd's votes have been friendly toward Russia. He voted against sanctions on Russia. I'm Pat McCrory. I don't compliment our enemies. I stand for truth and freedom.
It's very interesting, the subtext there also, because in addition I mean, it's not just Ted Budd who's complimented our enemies.
Yes.
Donald Trump did. He said that Putin was a genius. I should point out that Budd noted that in other parts of that same interview, he called Putin evil and a thug. What do you make of this, the politics of a Republican attacking a Republican for being soft on Putin?
Well, this is obviously what we're going to see in a Republican primary. This is going to be a big, big race. We're going to see a lot of money in this. This ad accusing him of being a Putin apologist is just the first of many. On the flip side, Budd, who has the support of the Club for Growth, having been on the receiving end of the Club for Growth attack ads, that's going to be brutal. And they are putting big money into going against McCrory. Already $4 million. They have $10 million in the bank to go after him. And while right now, out of the gate, we have one Republican calling another one a Putin apologist, by the time the Club for Growth is done, McCrory is going to look like a liberal Grim Reaper. So this is going to be a tough race.
Making McCrory liberal is going to be an interesting
feat.
He's not particularly liberal. But, you know, I do think it's interesting because you obviously do have this, you know, pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party these days. And I mean, you heard some of that echoed in Budd's comments, but also it's kind of surprising to see a Republican, given, you know, where the party has seemed to have been in the last month or so.
Well, I think we're learning a little bit about just how big that quote-unquote pro-Putin wing is, because certainly those voices have been the loudest, especially under Donald Trump, and some of the loudest anti-Putin voices in the Republican Party have been quieter, frankly, over the last 5 years because of the effect that Donald Trump has had on the party. But I think you've seen some people kind of pulling back on that a little bit. I think this is really, it's being exposed for what it is, which is a button that's being pushed that has echoes of white nationalism, the way that Putin has run Russia and become kind of a hero to white Christians. That is extremely unsavory, and it goes against, you know, being pro-Putin, pro-Russia goes against everything that the Republican Party stood for 3 decades before that. So, you know, I do think that this ad is extremely interesting for that reason, and it's going to be a real test.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I mean, we've heard those voices in prominent positions in conservative media and on Capitol Hill.
I mean, I think it shows the limitations of, like, Republicans want to be in lockstep with former President Trump, but on this issue of being, you know, if not necessarily pro-Putin, saying nice things about him, we know that doesn't sell well with regular people. And so they're pivoting not necessarily because of Trump, but in spite of Trump, because they know that the public sentiment is, you know, anti-Putin, stand, you know, firmly against him right now. And so that's why I think you're seeing the shift.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you just look at polling, even Republicans overwhelmingly, if they have to pick sides between Putin and Ukraine, they're picking Ukraine. They see what's going on. They're looking at the television. It's not just a theoretical thing now. It's a real thing. And so I don't think Republicans can win on that message, actually. I think it is a real problem for them to be pro-Putin. I just don't think it's going to sell. Now, look, we've seen Fox News and Trump poll voters in a certain way, but it doesn't seem so far that it's working.
All right, thanks one and all. Great panel. Really appreciate it.